right, welcome to Super Bowl Sunday. This is Stat 7 Sports. I'm Caleb, and I know it's been a little while since I've put anything out, but finally we're getting down to the big game, the Brady Bowl. If anyone has their opinion off of it for the past 10 to 15 years, Brady and Belichick having their run with the Patriots, they're finally not in a Super Bowl this year. But this time, they have the Super Bowl between two of the more prolific teams that they have beaten in recent times. So, last year you had MVP Patrick Mahomes getting beat in the AFC Championship game in a game that it really seemed like Kansas City had that to win until the last minute. And then, maybe not so much the 49ers themselves, but the coach of the 49ers, Kyle Shanahan, he was the coach of the Atlanta Falcons whenever Atlanta blew the 28-3 lead whenever they had their Super Bowl of Patriots and Falcons a few years back. Also in the fact that Garoppolo was basically supposed to be it was going to be Brady's replacement for like 3 or 4 years before Robert Kraft ended up deciding, we can't keep this guy. Let's try to get as much as we can off of him now because we don't want to end up paying him. Then they traded San Francisco for a 3rd-round pick. And after starting the latter part of 3 years ago, he gets a massive contract, which makes him like a top 5, top 6 paid quarterbacks at the time. Sure, he's gone a little bit further down the pack, but he still was paid for being something he had not proven at the time to be a top-tier quarterback. Now, since then, you had... he started the year 3-1, or 3-0 last year, and then he gets hurt very early in the season. They end up getting the 2nd overall pick, get Nick Bosa, and Bosa's been a beast. He's very likely going to be Defensive Rookie of the Year if it doesn't go to Josh Allen of Jacksonville, but probably going to be Bosa. And that just fully structured that defensive line for San Francisco with all sorts of former first-round picks. Dee Ford, you got DeForest Buckner, you got Eric Armstead. Both the latter two went to Oregon, former first-round picks. Yeah, Nick Bosa, Ohio State. Then if you actually have to go with a weakness for San Francisco, it would be defensively, it would be their front 7 is elite. You're not going to get a good push on them. And in this case, Kansas City doesn't really have any sort of running game. They've gotten away with not really having a running game in both the games in the playoffs so far. So, yeah, coming into this game, Kansas City they've come back from double-digit deficits in both of their playoff games. 24-0 deficit against the Texans, and then a 17-7 deficit against the Titans, where it's in the latter you thought, Kansas City was just going to run over them and just outscore them, outpace them. Eventually, that ended up being the case. But I've gone over that the championship game recaps. San Francisco, on the other hand, they kind of coasted through both of their games. The one against Minnesota, whenever Garoppolo threw the pick late in the first half, it was still relatively close, and Minnesota had a chance. But even with Minnesota having everyone back between Cook, Thielen, Diggs, Kyle Rudolph, they were completely healthy as much as they could have been. They had no offense. Then with Green Bay in the championship game, they jumped on them early on. Garoppolo threw 8 passes the entire game, and then They just ran and ran and ran with Coleman, with Breida, mainly with Raheem Mostert, with him having 4 touchdowns and nearly breaking an Eric Dickerson record in a playoff game. He was only about 30 yards away on that. But even with this screen head that I have on it, this Super Bowl between Kansas City and San Francisco, I don't think the main matchup is going to be, and I don't think anyone expects the main matchup to be Mahomes versus Garoppolo, because Mahomes is going to win that every single game of the year. No contest. Okay, maybe take away like a couple games. But one thing that's actually interesting for the fact is that, so this year's Madden, Mahomes was the face of the franchise there. But yes, he did get hurt with the broken kneecap, dislocated kneecap. But it only affected him for the time being. But Kansas City is still going to the Super Bowl, and if Mahomes didn't get hurt then, he'd have a very strong argument for winning another MVP. Now, San Francisco was most teams' sleeper picks to end up doing well and actually making the playoffs, potentially winning the division, even though their division would have been, it was very difficult having the Rams being in the Super Bowl last year, undeservingly so, but regardless, reigning NFC champions. Then also having Seattle, who has Russell Wilson, Pete Carroll. None of the Legion of Boom left, really, besides Bobby Wagner. Part of the Legion of Boom went to San Francisco with the 49ers, with Sherman. But that's actually, between him and Earl Thomas are actually the only 2 of Legion of Boom outside of Seattle that are actually relevant. So even though there's been games where Garoppolo's apparently thrown over 200 yards in the playoffs, sounds kind of familiar to how Ryan Tannehill was before he actually had to play the Chiefs. He didn't throw for 100 yards in either of the first 2 playoff games that they had before the AFC Championship game. They made Tannehill do more. He couldn't deliver. Now, San Francisco is a much better overall team than Tennessee is. This is going to be a very interesting matchup. It's going to be very competitive. The line has been teetering between 1 and 2 points in favor of the Chiefs. But honestly, I think there's so many factors on this that would make you think that San Francisco would be the favorite in this game. So San Francisco will be able to get teams to, they haven't been able to stop San Francisco's opponents haven't been able to stop the run in the postseason between Minnesota and Green Bay. Mostert ran all the way over them, and then Tevin Coleman ran through them in the against the Vikings. But Kansas City, it doesn't matter how big they get on a deficit early on. You think at some point it's got to catch up to them. They can't keep getting to these early game deficits and still consistently come back. Well, the 49ers can end up shorting games with their running game and with short passing game because of Coleman, Breida, Mostert, and they did one of the most effective trades for this postseason run and probably for the Super Bowl matchup in getting Emmanuel Sanders from Denver. He was not going to do anything for Denver. He's a solid number 1 receiver, but for a team that's not going anywhere, he would just be a waste until he ended up going to the free agency. And he has been a very quality pickup for them. That's made it to where some of their other pieces have been able to get more reception, more yardage, more frequently, between rookie Deebo Samuel, between Kendrick Bourne, Oh, and you can't forget about Kittle. But it's actually kind of interesting for the fact that I just found this stat out pretty recently, but this is the first Super Bowl that has both teams that have tight ends to have over 1,000 receiving yards this season, not including the playoffs. But San Francisco's got a load of targets to run the ball around, and they've got one of the best offensive lines that they've built up through the draft, and a mix from the draft and a mix from free agent signings. Defensively, it's been mainly draft and getting Quan Alexander and Richard Sherman as big free agent acquisitions over the past couple years. And that's made San Francisco a top 5 defense. Definitely at least top 2 or 3 in this playoff run where, yes, statistically the Patriots are better, but whenever the Titans hold the ball for the vast majority of a game, your defense is going to dwindle. But if Kansas City gets down to a early game deficit like they've been over the rest of the playoffs, San Francisco was just gonna pound the rock down their throats where Kansas City's defense has been better. Like, everyone's been getting healthy. But it's just going to be kind of a repeat of that Titans-Patriots matchup in the case where it's like you have Garoppolo's a better quarterback than Tannehill. And they have better targets. Overall, they have better targets, more complete targets than Tennessee does. But if you go on the other side of the ball, you have Kansas City with Mahomes. Damian Williams has been so-so. But there is so many receiving options for Kansas City. Between Tyreek Hill, between Mecole Hardman, between Travis Kelce, between Sammy Watkins. Need I go on it? And really the running game for the Chiefs is Mahomes. That's all they really need. Just looking at that 35-yard run for a touchdown that just deflated the Titans in the second half, whenever it happened in the end of the first half, that gave Kansas City the lead that they wouldn't give up again. But San Francisco's been able to prove that they can put bulks of points on the board, but most of the time it's with long extended drives. And that does work to the Chiefs' disadvantage, where if they get, I can see them getting down early and Mahomes having to play Superman to try to get them back. And the further on you actually go into the game, yes, Kansas City can get points in chunks, in bunches, and between them getting a honey badger, between getting Chris Jones being solid this season, between their defense has given up half the amount of points that they did in the first half, from the first half of the season to the second half. And they are definitely a very second half based team as seen in the postseason. They kind of have to get themselves going and just kind of figure out what the defense is going to bring. Now, yes, if they get to pushing some sort of a running game on it, it would definitely be more effective to tire out the San Francisco defense and make it to where Mahomes has just less difficulty finding his openings, running and receiving, getting outside the pocket, just flinging the ball 40 yards down the field to any of the speedsters on their team. Seriously, they have those 3 receivers that could get 60, 70-yard bombs very easily. I wouldn't be surprised if they were actually track stars in college. But so many situations that Kansas City's been through, you think that teams will be able to get to them on it. Like, Kansas City only lost 3 games the entire season. Oh, both teams have only lost 3 games the entire season. San Francisco, they've lost to Seattle. They've lost to Atlanta randomly. And the third one escaped. Oh, yeah, that's the Ravens. The Ravens game is what we thought was going to be the Super Bowl. But Lamar Jackson hasn't proven that he can actually win in the playoffs yet. Now, part of it, I do think that it is incredibly difficult to be able to get the combination of getting the MVP trophy, getting the Madden accolades, getting all of that, all the collection, all the trophies off of it, and still end up making it to the Super Bowl and winning it. After getting that disappointment last year in playoffs, Kansas City's able to get another step forward, and because it was like 2 years ago, they had to where they still had Alex Smith, and then Mahomes ended up playing the last game of the season because that last game didn't matter. And then they just went into the playoff. They went into the playoffs and were one and done. The following year, they go into the AFC Championship game and lose to the Patriots. This year, they're going to the Super Bowl, and it's really going 2 steps ahead. They went 2 steps ahead each time. Go from playoffs. Yeah, go from playoffs to getting a first-round bye and winning a game. Then you get first-round bye, winning 2 games, and getting to Super Bowl. So it would just be right for picking if it actually went on that same pace for them to actually win the Super Bowl. Now, each team has kind of gotten progressively worse as through the playoff season on their offensive line giving up more pressure to their quarterbacks. Despite actually the fact that they haven't had that in San Francisco's case, they haven't had to throw much. First game is Minnesota, they gave up 1 sack. Against Green Bay, they gave up 2 sacks. And at that point, it's like, okay, let's shut this down. Let's take it easy. We'll just keep the ball on the ground for like 43 times. And then just control the game, and Green Bay had to go pick up the whole time. For Kansas City, it was 1 sack given up against the Texans. And that's on a corner blitz. So that's Mahomes end up trying to escape and then getting sacked by Garrett Conley. And then against Tennessee, they give up 2 sacks. In that case, it's a couple of linebackers. Now, in both teams' playoff runs, they've been able to get pressure on the opposition and be able to actually force mistakes by their opponents. Not so much Kansas City in the first week. Like, they got pressure on Watson, mainly by Frank Clark, who has had 4 sacks in this postseason, which is absurd. 3 sacks against Watson against the Texans, and then he had another sack against Tannehill. But against Tannehill, they forced him into 2 interceptions, and if you count early in the first half, he could have easily had a third if Matthew actually got the pick on a miscommunication that between receiver and Tannehill. So now San Francisco forced their 2 NFC North opponents into some kind of desperation throws. Actually, both times where Sherman ended up getting interceptions, one against Thielen and one deep throw by Rodgers. I think that was to Adam Lazard. Now, Now, the one thing that Kansas City has that both the teams that San Francisco played before doesn't is that the mass quantity of receiving options that Mahomes goes to consistently. Really, for San Francisco, whenever they went into Green Bay, it's just Davante Adams and then just figure it out the rest of the way. You had points where Adams had like 10 catches and you had Lazard had 3. He was the number 2 receiver, but it was for 15 yards. And at that point, they put Sherman on Adams, and it really didn't matter the rest of the way. And against Minnesota, he shut down Diggs, and in Cousins' one pick, Cousins made that mistake to go against Sherman whenever he was playing on Thielen. He threw the ball in a little bit, and Sherman is still a very strong man-to-man cover. And he just undercut the throw. So it's going to end up putting a lot of pressure on that 49ers secondary between Sanford Tart, between Witherspoon, who has kind of struggled in the playoffs. So we'll have to see if he's actually going to be the number 2 corner or if they have their backup Quan Williams that played solid against Green Bay. But it's going to be who ends up tackling better in space with some of these speedier wide receivers for Kansas City. And San Francisco is a very strong tackling team with their strong defense as a whole. But on the opposing side of the ball with San Francisco, Kansas City doesn't have a lot of big names on their defense. And even though it's drastically improved, having Matthew being healthy, Honey Badger, having Reggie Ragland, having Frank Clark to be a consistent pass rusher for them, they've been able to lock down some of their opposing receivers where A.J. Brown, he did get yardage for Tennessee, but not to the effect that where they could take control of the game throwing the ball. And yes, Tannehill never actually proved that he could, but they held Derrick Henry to 69 yards rushing, where in like the last 10 games of the seasons, he was held under 100 yards one time. And I'm not counting the one game that they rested him against the Saints. But enough analyzing off of that. This is going to be a fun matchup with the gunslinger with Mahomes, who no one's able to get a good comparison to compare him through, except the gunslinger of the 90s and 2000s, Brett Favre. But Brett Favre never had the mobility that Mahomes did. And Garoppolo, the next supposed to be Brady golden boy in New England, trying to get his comeuppance outside of New England. So you're either going to get 2 coaches that have had their blunders in previous Super Bowl matchups. Like, I haven't even spoken anything about Andy Reid, who has a very wide amount of playoff experience, just not so much on Super Bowl experience. So it really puts them on even bars on it, where I don't see how much of that's going to really matter too much on it. The coaching advantage, like, yes, Reid is the more experienced coach in this case, but Kyle Shanahan's been in the playoffs multiple years. He has all the experience being an offensive coordinator for the Patriots. and he's had time with Garoppolo where he's the backup and him being a starter. And you're either going to get a shootout on this game, which is going to favor the Chiefs, or you're going to get one that's going to feel like it's going to be done in 2 hours. And that's going to favor the 49ers. I'm not saying that the 49ers can't actually play in a shootout, because they've done that once against the Saints in that 48-46 thrower. But both teams are going to have tight ends that are going to get their numbers. Both of them are going to try and force their strengths down their opponent's throats. Kansas City trying to push the ball down the field and get their speedy receivers to stream past the secondary. And then San Francisco is going to just run the ball down their throats, and Garoppolo is going to throw the ball more than 8 times. I can guarantee that. I know I think it was crazy that some of the odds were saying, some of the Vegas books were saying it's like, over under for Garoppolo was going to be 29 passes. I think it's going to be closer to 20. That just seems a little bit absurd. Sorry, completing 29 passes. I think that's absurd. But with this game, Mahomes has found time after time to exceed any expectation that you end up. If you're expecting something from him, he's exceeded those expectations every time. And that San Francisco defense hasn't seen someone like him with these skill positions around him to help let him just carry on and basically knife through any defense. So I am actually going to lean towards a shootout, and that means I am actually going to pick the Chiefs on it. I know there's so many factors that honestly would seem that the 49ers should be favored on this. It's usually defense wins championships. It's usually defense wins championships over the top flight quarterback most of the time. Take last year. The Rams are supposed to be the big style offense that nobody knew how to figure out. It has, from the point that the Rams scored 3 points in that game, their offense has been lackluster since, because the Patriots figured them out, and they had a very strong defense that carried over. But I think Mahomes is going to end up proving that wrong. 34-31. This is going to be fun. If there's enough interest on this, I will consider streaming the actual game. If not, I will put a reaction video after this game, and just go over statistical, all the stats off of it, and my post-game opinion on the whole game, how everything went. Now, I've rambled too long. Now with this, I'm the Contained Kunas. This is Stat7 Sports. Please like and subscribe. Let anyone know about it. I'll give more details later on future content, because we're getting close to early college baseball season. I'm going to do reaction to all the NFL draft, all the juniors and all of them that decided to leave early. I'll do college basketball results. I'll do other kind of statistical measures off of it. I'll make sure to keep y'all posted. Now, once again, this is Contained Kunas, and I'll see y'all next time.